Morning to all. Thanks for your punctuality. For those that have got here on time, we'll just give it another 30 seconds or so while the stragglers come through, and then we'll make a start. Just want to let people know that we are recording this session today. There's a number of people that have requested a copy of this. So if you are not comfortable when you ask questions to have your camera on, feel free to leave it off. But we absolutely encourage authentic human connections. So if you have the vulnerability, please turn your camera on when you ask questions. Just want to start by acknowledging the people who were custodians to these lands for many, many years. I'm coming from Glen Waverley this morning, which are the Burrajong and Wurundjeri clans in this area, and they continue to protect the lands, and I've been fortunate to actually sit with some of the members of those traditional owners as well, which has got some deep wisdom there. So what we want to do today is really inform you about the ShareTree Mental Health Fund, but we want to tell you a little bit more about why this fund might be important to you, give you some of the insights to equip you as employers of other people to protect the mental health and well-being of those that are serving your organisations. I've got Maurice here co-hosting today as well. So if you've got any questions whatsoever, feel free to use the chat or just unmute yourself and ask those questions. That's completely fine. There's a couple of questions and comments coming in at the moment, so I'll let you field those if you can, Maurice. And if any of the questions are for discussion, if you could just bring them to the discussion forum, that'd be great. So a little bit about ShareTree and us. We are really passionate about inspiring authentic connections, specifically where performance and wellbeing can thrive together. For a lot of organisations, they treat them as exclusive components to their organisation, but we've got a lot of research, experience and understanding that when you get wellbeing right, performance naturally flourishes together. And there's two components to that: the foundation, which is psychological safety and wellbeing and mental health, and at the heart of culture, which is values activation in teams. Today, we're going to be talking about the psychological safety component of that. A little bit about our impact. We've had 53,200 plus check-ins to date that we've inspired through solutions and technology across 105 different countries. We have also inspired more than 38,700 acknowledgements of character across 118 different countries. We're a fully registered charity, which means that everything we do is for community benefit. So we're going to be talking about psychosocial risk management today. And in order to talk about that, we might want to start with understanding what that means. So what is psychosocial risk? It's aggression, it's violence, it's bullying, it's exposure to traumatic content or events, it's sexual harassment, it's high job demands. Now, all of these things can vary in degree based on the person's makeup, their mindset, and the context of the experience. And there's different degrees of this in every context for every person. What we mean by high job demands is a sustained or repeated physical and mental or emotional effort, which is unreasonable or frequently exceeds the employee's skills or capacity. Now, that last line there means it's incredibly variable what each person's capacity and skills are. And what might be something that I could easily cope with might well indeed be a psychological risk for somebody else. And this is what makes this whole space really great, particularly with the new legislation that's come out in December 2023, which means employers need to be a lot more rigorous and prepared in the way that they care for and support their employees. So the question I've got for this group that's here today, we've got some 24 of you in the room at the moment, just using your chat now. What are the early indicators of psychological or psychosocial and psychological risks for you in your workplace and teams? What are your early indicators? How are you keeping a watch on that? How are you spotting where you might need to intervene? How are you checking in to see whether the psychosocial and psychological culture in your team is sound and sorted? Just use your chat and just pop in, what are your indicators? Now, if you think about your car, when you drive to work or you drive to see a friend or someone's giving you a lift, you've got this dash panel and it's telling you what's going on with the state of your vehicle. So what are your indicators for your workplace? Susie's saying it's occurrence, team disagreements, more than normal. For Jess, saying disengaged employees. For Grant, he's saying it's reduced productivity and collaboration. For Theo, it's saying people going into extreme introversion. Yeah, withdrawal is absolutely. For Dan, he's saying disengagement of team. Susie's saying absenteeism. Glenda's saying a level of exhaustion statements like I don't have capacity. Yeah, very good, Glenda, tuning in. Kyle is saying erratic or unusual behavior. Dianca is saying increased absenteeism. They are all absolutely signs. When it comes to indicators, there's two types of indicators. There's what we call lagging indicators, which means when an event starts to build up, we see the result of that flow through. And almost all of the ones that you've mentioned there, in fact, all of them, besides Kylie's statement around unusual behavior, are all lagging indicators. It means we've got to a state where our psychological state is so deteriorated that we've withdrawn, that we can no longer mask the way that we show up, and we actually show up in a different way, and we start breaking what's normal patterns. And that's right at the verge of breakdown. What is actually a leading indicator, these are the things that are showing us in a very early stage that things are starting to come off what would be considered the norm, are emotions. Simply emotions are our greatest indicator. And you know how you feel every day. As humans, we're incredible at regulating how our emotions show outwardly to those that we're engaging with. But on the inside, and if you've seen that movie at the moment that's out, Inside Out, an amazing movie to watch with your children and with your family, and for adults as well, it's exactly what's really going on. There's this internal dialogue that happens, and our emotions spill outwardly when we lose our ability to regulate with the prefrontal cortex. But our best indicators is actually to understand how people feel. It's actually to understand how we feel. And most of you here today are leaders. Leaders are more susceptible to mental health challenge than your teams. So let's now jump a little bit into what are psychosocial obligations. So these come from Safe Work Australia. If you want to get some good night reading and put yourself to bed, go for it. Maurice has generously invested his time to pull out all of the main aspects around this for you today. So Safe Work Australia regulations require employers to identify psychosocial hazards so far as reasonably practicable. And this means using what is best practice available to employers at the moment on the market. It's to eliminate or reduce any risks so far as reasonably practicable. It's to review and revise any measures implemented to control the risks. It's to put in place prevention plans and to have a prevention plan. It's to periodically report to WorkSafe any complaint whatsoever that associates to psychosocial risk for companies with more than 50 employees. So if you think about your physical risks, basically exactly the same requirements are now established for employers to manage psychosocial risks. And there's very good reason behind why they're doing this, which we'll share. When we talk about reasonably practicable, it means within your capacity now is to actually check in with every person every day. And we're going to show you some case studies now that have been claimed upon where employers weren't meeting these standards. So a little around mental health statistics. When we look at our workplace, these are specifically Australian statistics. It's actually greater when we look at a global statistics. About 43% of our team will experience some degree of mental distress within the year. Now, whether that emerges into a chronic case or not will vary depending on the context. But you can kind of say almost half of our team will go through some distress within the year. And when we look at Australian statistics around EAP usage, employee assistance programs that are designed to support this situation, only 6% of people are actually reaching out to those services. And this is the area where ShareTree has done a lot of research to understand, well, what's creating this 86% gap? And there's a vast array of reasons behind this that stop people from actually reaching out to EAP support, which we've helped resolve. So case study number 1 is with Court Services Victoria, ironically. So the court services themselves have had a claim made against them. And the specific claim was in psychosocial risk. The context was a toxic workplace culture. The court services was fined for not managing the psychosocial risk. Several workers took leave after reporting feelings of anxiety, PTSD, stress, fear, and humiliation. And sadly, some workers never returned to the workplace, including the principal house solicitor, Jessica Wilby, who actually committed suicide 3 months later as a result of the culture and the toxic situation she was exposed to. So Court Services Victoria was fined $379,000 for not maintaining a psychosocial and a psychologically safe work culture and not managing the psychosocial risk of their employees. So it's an employer's duty, legal duty, to do everything possible they can to support their workers to thrive in their roles and ensure they leave work each day no worse than they arrived. That's coming directly from the WorkSafe Executive Director, Narelle Beer. So the full case study's there. We will share these slides in the follow-up email with the video as well. So if you want to explore that case further, you're welcome to do so. The second case study here is related to providing a safe work environment. Now, this has been particularly exacerbated now with almost all workplaces moving to hybrid models of working from home. It was a domestic violence while working from home for this individual. A woman experienced domestic violence while working from home. She's a mother of 2, and she was killed in the incident by her de facto partner. The New South Wales Workers' Compensation awarded the claim that was made by her children. The employer failed to provide a safe work environment for the employee. The workplace was fined $450,000. That was compensation to those that lost their mother. But sadly, you can never replace the mother. And it's important that managers make sure their staff feel comfortable telling them that if they don't feel safe working from home, even if they don't want to give the details, was the judge's statement. And the employer failed to provide that opportunity to their employee in a safe means for them to disclose and share that they were unsafe in their work environment. So something to seriously consider. And when we work with a lot of organisations, what we find is most organisations are completely actually unaware of the risk of allowing their employees to work from home. How we would get away with it in the old sense, working from the office, is you could argue that I observed the employee when they were in the work environment. Now, we would say that that's not even accurate in itself because people are incredibly good at masking their emotions. So what's the total cost of mental health claims? These are the work health and safety statistics from 2022. They have increased since. They haven't been released for 2024 as yet. Mental health conditions, 12,155 serious claims. These are all claims that were made for specifically mental health. 9.3% of all claims were related to mental health, and the median compensation was $55,000 per claim. And the median time off work was 30 weeks. So for every one claim there's actually 4 potential claims that are sitting under the blankets in the woodwork that could potentially spring up at any one time. So if you have a claim in the workplace, you're actually at the very pointy end of that risk. Ideally, what you want to know is earlier on near misses, and even earlier on from that, people that are in emotional distress patterns at early stages to prevent them getting to places where a claim might even eventuate. Often cause of physical claims as well. So there's strong association with every mental health claim that they are actually the underlying causes of a lot of the physical claims. They're the longest time to recover of all claims and the most costly of all claims, and they're actually on the rise. So with the research that we mentioned earlier on about that 86% gap, we found that the major part of that gap and the people that weren't going to EAP were in fact either keeping the situation to themselves or sharing it with a colleague at work. And when we asked why they would share it with a colleague at work, it came down to trust. So the solutions that were built around this were actually about fostering what are the natural patterns and creating a culture of trust within the workplace. So the framework that the government recommends is promotion, prevention, and early intervention. And the solution is built around that. So promotion is all about fostering emotional self-awareness, helping people to actually stop within a day and check in with themselves. And the feedback from all of the organizations and people we've worked with is that this is the single most beneficial feature, that a reminder and permission from their employer to stop within a day, to check in with themselves for no more than 10 or 15 seconds to actually understand, how am I feeling? And is this different to what I would normally feel? And if it is, what's creating that scenario? It's to give people what we call lift training, to help people understand how to listen effectively, to inquire about needs, to find way to support needs, and to take time to acknowledge people for being vulnerable. It's building psychological safety culture. When it comes to prevention, like putting the seatbelt on in the car, it's having an organization risk assessment and prevention plans in place. It's forming workplace trusted pairs, linking into these bonds where people are naturally going to, but now these people have the skills of lift and have pathways to get support when required. And having, through the first responders and the organization, wellbeing plans available for people that are in early stages of distress. For early intervention, it's confidential check-ins, it's providing psychological safety, it's mental health first responder support. Train people within the workplace that people know and trust that are there to give confidential support to people in distress. When it comes to skilled support, it's still connecting to your EAP services. But what makes that more effective is that you have a trusted first responder that is having conversations with that person at early stages. And if they're seeing patterns, they're giving that person the confidence to walk beside them to those professional services. And we want to train and announce those first responders or first aiders. Both programs are available, and we offer both of those as part of the program. And in fact, the fund will cover off first responder training. And the last part is advocacy and reporting. This is a new requirement that's all part of the legislation that's coming out, that has come out in most states except Victoria. They're the ones lagging behind, but they'll soon follow suit. So this is confidential individual insights for the individual, monthly reporting for teams to understand what the patterns of culture are, and organizational reporting for boards, which is now a legal requirement. So how Mental Health Fund works. So we're a fully registered charity and we operate under a model called Charity as a Service. Our passion is to give these important skills to children, to schools, and support the underprivileged in the community. So we work with businesses, which is really the greatest opportunity to tackle mental health. It's people aged between 24 to 45 that are most susceptible to chronic mental health and suicide. And all of these people typically work within workplaces. So We also support schools and community orgs and families. Now, as a charity, when we run programs with clients, because we're a charity, what would ordinarily be a profit, we route those profits and donations into the ShareTree Mental Health Fund. The ShareTree Mental Health Fund is then used to support schools programs, underprivileged, not-for-profit programs as well, and seed support programs for progressive organisations like yourselves. Those that want to be actually at the front edge, leading the way, creating cultures that are really built around psychological safety, and as a result, higher performing. We want to support those organisations to lead the way, and that will flow back into more funds for the community. What does the program involve? I've got a comment there. Oh, yep, Maurice has already covered that. What does the program involve? So what the main skill that you'll take out of this is actually the first responder certified training. It's a 3 times 3 hour sessions. In those sessions, you'll be broken up to learn lift skill set in a deep way and ACT skill set, which is all about assessing risk, collaborating on support plans, taking time to check in with people. You'll be able to complete a certification around that, which is internationally recognized, helps meet your compliance requirements for workplace support. All the resources for establishing your workplace culture are included with this program. So technically, you only need really one person to have these skills and resources in order to create a workplace culture. What we see to be effective, though, is that you have a trained first responder or first aider for every 10 to 15 people in the workplace. That's a ratio that works really effectively when it comes to supporting mental health and psychological safety. Now, there are optional sessions post the first responder training to support you in coaching for the workplace implementation. There's 5 sessions that will run for 2 hours. The first one is a self-assessment tool for creating your prevention plans. It goes through all of the framework requirements to establish where you're at, and it gives you then a roadmap about what you should work on and implement in order to meet the standards and the code of practice. The second session's about setting up technologies to help with team check-ins. We provide you with a technology that was developed by the charity called Emotional Pulse, but there are other options out there as well for check-ins. One of them is within your Microsoft Teams, Viva. Some of them have compliance gaps, but we'll go through all of that in that session. The third session is about cultivating cultures of trust and psychological safety. This is really working on the human element of things. I mean, you can have all the compliance in the world, you can have all the frameworks in the world, but if you don't have leaders that lead and build trust and authentic connections with people, foster psychological safety, you will be challenged to actually create a culture that's high performing. And this session's all about creating the human element of that culture beyond the framework. Fourth session is about lift. We will actually go into the lift session. We will unpack the resources that these first responders get as part of the program, and we will roll out the program as you would for your workplace. So you get a real life experience about how you might roll this out in the workplace for your own teams. And then the last session is a general support session, and we'll ask if people are willing to share to measure some of the feedback of the program for the fund. So the Mental Health First Responders program is available. If you don't, meet the grant requirements or you want to do more than the cap that we have available, you can purchase the program directly. It's $299 per person. It's a fully recognized, internationally certified program and endorsed by the Mental Health Foundation. It's for a whole range of people, essentially any person that cares for, leads for, or values other people. The 3 days are broken up into day 1, really deep dive into the lift skill set. Day 2, really deep dive into the ACT skill set. And then day 3 is all about building frameworks in your organization, equipping you and becoming familiar with all the tools. That includes organizational risk self-assessment tools, self-care and wellbeing plans. We cover a little bit about burnout and conflict, and then how to complete your certification. Michelle's asking about LIFT. So LIFT skill set is really about how do we have powerful, heartfelt, caring conversations with people in distress. As leaders, what the tendency is for us to do is to actually jump in and rescue and fix. It's what we do all day. And what the LIFT skill set does is help you identify when we might not need to fix something, when what we actually need to do is actually to stop and listen, inquire about the person's needs, find a way to support those needs, and then to thank and acknowledge them for having the vulnerability to share something that's challenging. When we practice that LIFT skill set, the acronym of listening, inquiring, finding, and thanking, we actually help build good psychological safety in workplaces and create good support networks within teams. So it's a skill set that we give out freely to the entire community. Thanks, Michelle, for that question. The sessions, Glenda, the sessions for the fund program, there's two parts. There's the three-hour sessions for mental health first responder. That's all live online. You can take that program from anywhere in the world. The next part is the group coaching sessions. These are optional sessions about all the different elements from taking the resources from first responder to activate your workplace culture with whatever means you want to do. We'll take you through best practice, and we'll get other people from organizations to share how they've used these tools in the past or currently and how they've found benefit from them. So when it comes to the technology solutions, we will give you the Technology Emotional Pulse. It's a free software for individuals. For enterprises, we have a small subscription fee, less than a cup of coffee per month per person. And that money routes back into these funded programs for community and schools. Simply helps people reflect on a daily basis or a weekday basis. How are you feeling? This is it where I am. I'm actually up here today, a bit excited about this workshop, but it then aggregates these patterns. It's completely confidential. It helps you foster then those lines of trust, be it at work, be it at home, where you're comfortable to openly disclose to people how you're feeling. You can see my mum's there, and I've got a few friends. Those people, when I check in, can see how I'm feeling, and I can see how they're feeling if they choose to do the same. And then from a work perspective, it gives you a confidential view of where the team is at any point in time. You can see I'm here in orange. Nobody knows who's who, but as a team member, as a leader, as a responsible person for mental health, it's incredibly insightful to understand what's going on in any day point in time with the team and understand the trends which comes out in the reporting. It links directly to your EAP services, and the reporting comes out in cycles, plus there's live insights as part of the technology. Now, we also have a simple version of this, which integrates directly into Microsoft Teams, that just prompts your teams to check in on a daily, on a weekly basis, whatever you want to set as a rhythm, and that aggregates also then for your reporting. Now, individuals can then extend to the full version, the organization can as well, or you can just stay on the simple check-in version that's there on Microsoft Teams. So this also links to your EAP and your reporting. So the grant program, we've got a few questions that's starting to come up for the grant program. So we'll get through those and then we'll open up to general questions. We've got plenty of time. We're well ahead of the schedule. So the opportunity that's here right now with this grant program is for any organization that wants to be progressive in mental health practices and frameworks. The program runs from August to October. So we'll put out the dates and times once we have all the fund applicants through. It's a pilot program run in a do-it-yourself format. So we're not rolling out the full program for you in the workplace. That is an option available to you if you choose to do that upfront. Quite a few organizations did that last year. You can do it midway through the DIY program. You can not do it at all. You can do it post the program. It doesn't really matter. We are fully equipping you with the full skill set to roll this out in your own workplace. Eligibility, you need to be committed to the mental health first responders training. If you take one of those spots, please attend because you're taking a spot away from potentially somebody else that wanted that training. You need to implement a pilot program within the workplace to promote a culture of support and improve check-in practices. It doesn't need to be with the technology we provide as part of the program complementary, but you do need to advance the way that we check in. It's the biggest compliance gap that's actually out there at the moment between employers and employees. You can have a maximum of 10 places per any employer. We've raised the restrictions on that eligibility this year. So any workplace can have up to 10 places directly for their employees. If you want more than that, we should be running a custom program for you at your own workplace. The contribution required per place to total program value is $1,285 plus GST. That's all of the first responder training, the coaching sessions, and the complementary software that you get as part of it. The for-profit organisations, we're only asking you to contribute $150 towards that total value. And for not-for-profits, we've reduced it even further. We're only asking for $75 per person for that. So it's incredibly accessible. There should be no reason for any organisation that wants to advance mental health that they can't actually create an effective plan that removes their risk, but more importantly, builds good psychological and support culture within their teams. So the next step from here, if you are interested, it's an obligation-free application. It's just to register. I'll give you the link shortly after this, and if you can copy and paste it, put it in the chat to Maurice. After you register, we'll go through all the applicants. We'll award places to those that are most aligned to the intent of the charity. But if you want 10 places, apply for all 10 places. You never know your luck. We will be giving priority to schools and to healthcare providers and not-for-profits, but we're out there to support every organisation. Complete then the mental health first responder training sessions, and then attend the implementation and coaching sessions, and then implement a pilot at the minimum in your workplace. So open up to questions now. There's a 3-minute application link there for those that want to move ahead with an application. All we're asking for is just your contact details so we can reach out to you, and then your organisation information so we can assess how many spots we can potentially give you. So that's all from me. Open up for questions now. Either just unmute yourself or feel free to use the chat as well.
Thanks, Steve. Really good session. Happy to break the ice here. Guys, that hit a note from me. Steve and I are a good friend, known each other for a long time, and I myself shied away from the mental health piece for a number of reasons, ego and a number of other things, but real life example of, obviously, if Steve, if you will, of what if you don't listen to your mental health or don't have the right practices in the workplace. But I used to own a tech company myself, and about this time last year, I collapsed at a work conference in Melbourne, the Sofitel, and had a brain bleed, a brain clot, and brain bruising. I was rushed to St. Vincent's for a craniotomy, mainly due to mental health, bad behaviors, bad practices. Not to blame anyone but myself, and just didn't ask for help. Maybe others didn't pick up the signs, and that was real. Just 31-year-old standing in front of 150 people, fell, had a seizure on the ground, and I've now reconnected with Steve, and I've been off work now for almost a year to focus on my health and recovery, and I've got permanent. You mentioned the amygdala earlier, executive function, permanent damage to my prefrontal lobe. So I really want to do more to help you, Steve, on this mission, because it's affected me and my family, and obviously nearly died. So might sign me up for 10. I'll ask a question in a second. I've recently started a non-for-profit focused on men's mental health, because there's obviously men, generally speaking, has suicide rates, don't ask for help. So Steve, thank you so much for that. But what's the best way to get started? Like, going back to my career, like, there's a lot you can do, but for businesses to get started, number one, and then secondly, like the risks of, say, someone that has the training, and potentially if they don't notice a sign, are they susceptible or liable for anything that may happen? You know, if someone, they don't pick up the sign and God forbid something bad happens to that person. So yeah, number one, the best way to get started. Number two, the risks involved for maybe, you know, not picking up on a mental health signal.
Sure. Thanks, Kyle, for sharing your story as well. It's a real life example of, you know, when things get left by the wayside and we don't check in with teams, how really detrimental it can be and how it affects not just the person, but all of those people that are in their loving sphere. How to get started? The simplest way to get started is to really start to build authentic trust and connections between people, which is what the One of Us group is amazing at doing. Men are terrible in particular at doing that. And when we create a trusted environment and leaders lead with vulnerability, it helps then start to create a culture around, you know, breaking down the stigma of being vulnerable. And it's really simple to start that process. It's in your weekly meetings, asking a simple question to your teams, like, what's been most challenging this week? And the first few times that leaders do that, there's crickets, there's silence, particularly in men-dominated workplaces. But women are also susceptible to all these things. But when the leader leads with vulnerability and they start sharing stories, it starts setting culture, say that it's actually okay to talk about what's challenging. In fact, it's high performance to talk about what's challenging, because if you can talk about your emotions and the challenges that you emotionally experience, then guess what you're going to do when there's a process challenge? You'll easily come forward with that problem. And when you can see the challenges, you can work through them and you can improve, including your own mental health. So the easiest thing for any organization to do is to start promoting, to having conversations around it. We equip you with those questions and skill sets as part of mental health first responder training. We give you the resources to actually roll that out. And then once you have that, then it's to deepen. You know, deepen that awareness of self by checking in with yourself, deepen that awareness with people you trust by checking with each other, and deepen that awareness as an organization by checking in as a group.
Thanks, Steve. I just want to say, yeah, thanks, mate. Hit a nerve there. You're rightly so. As a man, it was actually the women in my life that suffered the most. Missed my daughter's second birthday. Mum flew over from Ireland before came to consciousness, and my wife, you know, at the window. So yeah, especially as men, yeah, that ego kicks in, and you don't really ask for help. But it's good you raised that point because it hit a nerve for me. So, my thank you.
No worries. Thank you for the question. I'll stop the share. If there's any other questions there, just feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. The link's there for the registration. We will send through a link to the recording today as well. Any other questions at all? Or Michelle, did you want to potentially share a little bit about what you got out of the program last year?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. Very insightful program in terms of that lift technique as well. It's such an easy way to approach conversations, yet sometimes as leaders we can get over involved in that conversation, and it's very easy to slip into that, whereby we really want to help, but we may overstep, we may make the wrong decision. You know, I've been in HR 24 years now, and mainly I make the right decisions. But you can get it wrong, you know, and following that technique creates a conversation, which is what you want to have with the person. I just wondered if you wanted to share. I've got quite a few of my lovely people on the line today. Just any tips for leaders who are, you know, basically facing, you know I certainly in HR face with a number of different clients challenges all the time, and I'm lucky that I'm working with some great people who really want to implement this kind of culture change into their workplace. They've already got great cultures, but we are worried about the psychological safety of our people. And we want to make sure that they are getting what we can give them as well as resources. Any tips for leaders in just the day-to-day now of how difficult it is, Steve, just to manage people? In your experience, what kind of advice can you give leaders?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Michelle, for sharing a little bit about the power of lift as well. and the good question. So for leaders, the single most important thing is to build authenticity and truth with yourself. Like once you can get to a point of acknowledging how you truly feel and to share that with confident vulnerability, and that's what we help leaders develop, you will see that organically starting to spread into your relationships in life, work included. So turning up with your whole self to work, engaging in a way that, shows that you're vulnerable. In fact, leaders, from that 43% that I shared before, 63% of leaders experience mental health challenge. So leaders are more vulnerable and less inclined to ask for help, which is why they're more inclined to end up in claims. And how you protect from that, the claim is not important. What's important is your actual mental health and the relationships you have in your life. And by connecting into how you truly feel is the quickest way to actually build an organic culture within your team and to actually safeguard yourself against challenge in life. Now, the longer we leave those, the more they build up. It's an amplifying factor. The more we lie to ourselves, the more we live in untruth and inauthenticity, and we don't step into our vulnerability and work on our well-being, the greater that amplifies and the bigger the impact to everyone around us, particularly if you're a leader, because all of that inauthenticity starts to seed everywhere we go. And it can lead to all sorts of things in life. So yeah, great question. Hope that gives a little bit of an insight.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, Steve. I think that as leaders, we often take more on and want to look after everyone else. I've certainly fallen into this trap over many years of looking after other people until you realize you're depleted. So it's really important that we do that we're honest with ourselves about how we're feeling and actually use the technique on ourselves if needed,
Yeah.
to check in
Yeah, I mean,
and have a trusted person.
absolutely. Having that trusted bond with people. Like I have a pairing connection with my partner. I've been married for like 19 years. And before we didn't have such deep conversations. We go, how you doing? And we have programmed responses. We have them in the workplace even more so. How you doing? Yeah, I'm doing great. But when you actually reflect on how you truly feel, and I can see where my partner's flat today, I'll come home a bit earlier. I'll make space and time for that conversation, and vice versa. And you can have that with the people that you trust, your friends, your employers. It's really about building authentic connections with people. I was going to ask also, Theo, you have a full workplace established around this type of culture and framework. Did you want to just share potentially how it's changed your workplace?
Yeah, I guess the change begins with yourself. And there's a lot of what you said before around your leadership style and going through my own evolution in showing vulnerability and being a leader that can have better connections with the team through just being more authentic. Has definitely helped a lot in the workplace. I know the sort of conversations that I have, they're deep and they're meaningful, and it grows a strong bond. And no doubt, I mean, it's hard to measure the difference, but you definitely see the signs through. It's those one-on-one conversations that you have in the meeting room that, you go into a meeting room and before you even start talking about work, it's that 10 minutes of a real good conversation on how someone is. And it's, we always ask the question, how you going? And typically it just comes out like unauthentic, but when you're more self-aware of how important this stuff is, and you ask the question with authenticity, how are you going? It comes up a lot more different. People feel that, even though it's the same words, and you get a completely different response. And I know just through my connections, it's certainly made a big difference, and it's made a big difference to myself as well. I know it's certainly helped my relationships. That's why I posted in the chat group there. It's it's not only the difference that you make in your workplace, it's the difference that you make across your whole life. It's your connections with your friends and your family and your partner. It's quite transformational.
Thanks for sharing, Theo. So Theo leads a team, high demand work team, high performance team, distributed right across the country, and boasts a perfectly clean record of both physical and mental health clear history, more than 19 years now. So a testament to your leadership and the depth of connection. In fact, they had one colleague within their team have a physical situation, and because of such strong connections, were able to come to that person's aid immediately. So it's been very, very beneficial, and it's good to see a leader evolve personally as well as professionally. Any other questions from the group at all, or comments that people want to share?
Yeah, one more from me, Steve. It all makes sense of what we're talking about, and obviously, as mentioned, it resonates with me. For me, maybe part of the reason, or one of the many reasons, didn't ask for help. How do you stop the vulnerability being used as a weakness? You know, particularly in a corporate world, climate. Let's say it's an organization of 1,000, 10,000 people. As an extreme example, where the leader is vulnerable, and then that can be potentially used for maybe another employee, because that's the world that we live in, right? You gotta be frank about these conversations. That maybe that weakness being used as leverage for someone else to climb above someone else to get to the top. Because that's as I said, a dog eat dog world that we can't live in. I know we want to get to a place where there's the trust there, and also across the whole group. But let's say you're starting from a really toxic work environment where the leader takes on your course and says, right, well, I'm ready to be vulnerable to hopefully take the team with me. How do you mitigate those potential risks of it being used as a weakness?
Yeah, I mean, a high performance workplace is one that has a culture of psychological safety. There's a stack of science there. Google did an extensive review around that. So any leader that's operating out of an old school mentality, first and foremost, needs to be educated about where high performance comes from and how it lives. The second part around that is to have role models of vulnerability within the workplace. So when we are not attuned to showing vulnerability, what helps us break that pattern is to have someone that we trust show us a model of healthy vulnerability. And when we have that model of healthy vulnerability, then we start to slowly step into it. Now, leaders are best positioned for this because there's tends to be a natural bond where people are starting to look at you because of structure around what vulnerability might look like, what good leadership looks like. And when that seeds over time, and it's not any one instance, it's a whole thread of conversations, a whole thread of actions, a whole thread of support, and a whole thread of observations within the culture that helps then shift a culture around. If you've worked for 20 years in companies that will be punitive against, someone showing vulnerability and mental health challenge, guess what your natural tendency is going to be when you go to the new company? Hide, mask, disclose nothing. So when you need as many experiences that created the challenge to break the challenge. So don't go into this thinking, I'll do a mental health first responders program and we'll get culture transformation in one shot. No, what you've done is just seeded a plant to start growing. And now you need to sprout that by creating the culture around it. You and other first responders and the HR team and the leadership and the team members, it starts to propagate bit by bit by bit. One of the clients we work with is a national provider for construction. They seeded one little pocket in the organization that grew. They saw the results of that. They went from mental health claims within that department to not only zero claims, but a healthy culture where people at early stages are disclosing when they need support. And it's a total transformation. Some leaders think that, because people are disclosing now they need support, we've created a problem. No, you haven't created the problem. What you've done is you actually help a problem that was propagating and festering come to the surface. And when we can deal with it, then we can improve it.
Yeah, no, thank you. A couple of things you mentioned earlier is obviously you need to obviously be able to see the challenges direct. And then you mentioned obviously your company's name ShareTree about sprouting the roots. It's also an element that sounds like, if again encapsulate, is like almost like it can also maybe help take out the weeds. So if you've got that toxic workplace and you're trying to make a change and you're implementing this, all those toxic people potentially can be weeded out if they don't come along in this journey of high performance and trying to help with people's mental health.
I mean, it'll be pretty obvious once you have a culture of care, support, and performance. When people are actually not genuinely caring for people, that becomes obvious. But ultimately, Kyle, everyone has a sense of care within them. And where it typically comes from that you don't care for others is because you haven't found a way to care for yourself. And when people develop that, it starts to organically flow. So yeah, comments there. Yeah, culture, Glenda was saying, is complex. There's no one solution fits all. Absolutely, Glenda. Like, culture's our space. You really need to understand what's going on, have a hand, on the pulse, have a foot to the ground, have an ear to the conversations, and find out where you're at. Use technology to aid that strategy, but then you've got to cater to every person, every situation, every culture uniquely. Any other questions at all? We're spot on for time. Good. You can just use the chat, or you can just unmute and. Excellent. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, we will hang around in the room till 12. But if there's no more questions, that will bring us to the end of this info session. If you enjoyed the little snippet that you got from today, it's a taste for what's to come out of the whole program. Share it far and wide. We'll support as many organisations and individuals within our capacity. The current fund is capped at 100 places, but if we exceed that, we will bring in more facilitators and run either a second program or we'll double the program. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Leon. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Theo.
Thanks, Steve.
So Maurice and I will hang around. If people don't have that vulnerability yet, feel free to hang around in the end and we can have a private discussion too. Thanks, Susie. Awesome. Thanks, Danica. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for sending the message, Dan, as well. So, Corey, we still have you there. Did you have a question at all, Corey? Oh, all right, we might close the session then. Recording.